My cousin posts bed photos on WeChat moments every day, saying that her husband loves her so much. On her wedding day, she still wore a slit miniskirt, showing the marks of love on her thighs. As a result, the skirt suddenly split open. At the critical moment, I stood in front of her to prevent her from being exposed. She was extremely grateful to me. Later, her husband had an affair, but she blamed me. If it weren't for you standing in front of me on my wedding day and stealing my good luck, my husband wouldn't have had an affair. She drugged and seduced my fiancé, wanting me to taste the feeling of being betrayed as well. As a result, the seduction failed. She became angry out of shame and made a big scene at my wedding. She made my mother so angry that she had a heart attack, and she pushed me down the stairs. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day of her wedding. Gina. Quickly, like my WeChat moments post, a familiar voice rang in my ears, and I realized that I had been reborn. I opened my phone and saw the WeChat moments post sent by my cousin. Getting married today. Last night, my husband insisted, and left so many hickeys. So shy. The picture showed my cousin's thighs full of red marks and the back of her husband's pot-bellied figure. My cousin likes to post sex bed photos of her and her husband on WeChat moments very much. And after posting, she urges us to like them. When I think of what her dear husband did in my previous life, I just want to laugh. Have you liked it yet? Come and help me look at the wedding dress. My cousin urged excitedly. I looked up and saw my cousin, just like in my previous life, hovering in front of two wedding dresses. There was still 1 hour before the entrance, and she hadn't chosen the wedding dress yet. One was a long-style wedding dress with an elegant design, and looked very expensive. The other was customized for her by the bridesmaid. Not only was the fabric of poor quality, but it was also so short that it reached the thigh. And there was a slit on the side of the skirt. The bridesmaid next to her immediately said, "It must be the slit miniskirt. Only in this way can your figure be shown. Especially with so many marks on your legs. You must show them so that others can see at a glance that your husband loves you very much." My cousin was so flattered that she raised her chin and nodded. I also think this one is worthy of me. Then, she threw the other wedding dress at me. With a sarcastic look on her face. "Gina, what kind of lousy wedding dress did you find for me? Are you deliberately trying to fool me?" Yes. This wedding dress was chosen by me. I used a lot of connections, and spent a lot of money. But in the end, she belittled it as worthless. I immediately folded the dress and stretched out my hand. "Okay, pay me." My cousin's face darkened. "What money?" I raised my voice. "You said let me help you choose a wedding dress. And the price was not a problem. I guessed you couldn't afford it either. So this wedding dress was rented by me. You just need to pay the rental fee." "Why? Do you want to renege on your debt?" Because the relationship between our two families was still harmonious. And my cousin and I hadn't seen each other for more than 10 years and didn't understand her character. So in my previous life, not only did I not ask for money, but I also kept busy helping her with the wedding. At the critical moment when she was about to be exposed, I still rushed forward to block her. Unexpectedly. In the end, my kindness ended up like that. Reborn. Whoever wants to be this sucker can be. But I won't be anyway. I raised my voice. "If you don't pay, I'll have to go to my brother-in-law." My cousin, who wanted to renege on her debt, quickly took out her phone. "No. I'll transfer the money to you." "How much?" She and her husband had a flash marriage and didn't understand each other's characters. Of course, she didn't want me to ruin her image. I curled my lips. 10,000. To what? My cousin's voice changed pitch. "I can't even spend 10,000 on a wedding dress. You're not going to give it, right? Then I'll go to my brother-in-law." I pretended to turn around and leave. My cousin quickly grabbed me and gritted her teeth to transfer the money to me. I took the money, picked up the wedding dress and was about to leave. But my cousin asked me to leave the wedding dress behind. I paid for it. "Why are you taking it away now?" I slapped my forehead. I forgot to tell you. It's 10,000 yuan per hour. If you want to wear it, you still have to give me another 10,000. My cousin's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. But she could only watch me take the wedding dress away. I packed up the wedding dress and sent it away. When I came back, I heard a strange sound in the fire escape. I walked over quietly and sure enough, I saw the same scene as in my previous life. The bridesmaid was hooking the groom's neck and kissing passionately. The two of them were kissing furiously. 10 minutes later, the two of them walked out of the fire escape one after the other. I hid aside and pretended that I hadn't seen anything. In my previous life, when I bumped into this scene, I secretly reminded my cousin to be careful. But my cousin was sarcastic, saying that I was jealous of her wealthy family. This time I won't say anything. I wonder if she will find out. Half an hour later, my cousin came to the entrance of the banquet hall to wait and get ready to enter. The groom also came to her side. My cousin turned her head, and her face froze instantly. "Husband, why is there lipstick on your neck?" I looked over and saw a faint lipstick mark that hadn't been wiped clean. The groom touched it guiltily. It should be the makeup artist who rubbed it on. I thought that a big fight was about to break out. But unexpectedly, my cousin actually accepted this explanation. She even began to blame the makeup artist. The makeup artist is heavily made up. One can tell she's not a good person at a glance. She even rubbed her lipstick on you. So disgusting. I almost laughed out loud. Calling others disgusting? I don't know who was the one who posted on WeChat Moments every day about how many times she had sex with her husband in one night. My cousin turned to look at me and the bridesmaid. "You two go and give the makeup artist a bad review. See if she dares to seduce other people's husbands in the future." I opened the app and without hesitation gave a full mark positive review. 3. The wedding march sounded. And the door opened. My cousin took the groom's arm and swayed her hips as she stepped onto the red carpet. Relatives and friends saw her dress like this and covered their mouths and snickered. My uncle and aunt's faces were even more ugly, as if they had eaten shit. In my previous life, my cousin blamed me for stealing her good luck, and brought my uncle and aunt to make a big scene at my wedding. My mother died suddenly of a heart attack, because she was so angry. And my father passed away gloomily. I was extremely exhausted during the funeral. My cousin's family took the opportunity to push me down from the upstairs. And I died on the spot. If I had known what kind of people they were earlier, we would have ignored them from the very beginning. "Why is she dressed like this?" my uncle and aunt questioned me. I sat down at a good angle to watch the fun and said helplessly, "She insisted on wearing it. I couldn't stop her. She said only this kind of wedding dress was worthy of her." My uncle was very unhappy. "I think you did it on purpose. People who study are so scheming. Are you jealous seeing your sister getting married? And you're a master's degree holder. All that studying has been in vain. Old geezer. Shut up." Taking advantage of my uncle opening his mouth, I quickly crumpled up a napkin into a ball and threw it into his mouth. My uncle was instantly enraged. Before he could spit out the tissue in his mouth, a scream came from the stage. A burst of exclamations broke out around. My uncle hurriedly looked at the stage and saw that the slit line of my cousin's dress had completely torn open. My cousin covered her private parts while pulling the bridesmaid beside her desperately to block in front of herself. The bridesmaid staggered as she was pulled and grabbed my cousin's arm. And the two of them fell on the stage together. The scene was in chaos. The groom, who should have been the closest to my cousin, and protected her immediately, stood still and didn't react. Seeing everyone's onlooking eyes, he even embarrassingly abandoned my cousin and ran off the stage alone. For the wedding ended in a farce. My cousin and the bridesmaid had a fight backstage. She said it was all the bridesmaid's fault for giving her a low-quality dress, which made her look so ugly. Finally, the police came before the two calmed down. After I went home, I told my parents about my cousin's family's attitude towards me. My parents were very angry. My mother immediately called my uncle and scolded him, and then blocked all their family's contact information. My grandfather favored boys over girls, so my mother left home after she became an adult. Over the years, She had maintained an either too close nor too distant relationship with my uncle. This time, my uncle came to ask her for help. Out of blood-related kinship, she nodded and let me go to help. As a result, my uncle's family bullied me like this. Gina, we're sorry you were wronged. Leave that family group chat too. Let's cut off all relations with them completely from now on. I shook my head. Dad. Mom. It's still useful for me to stay in this group. Looking at my healthy and happy parents in front of me, I became more determined to make that crazy family get what they deserved. The next day, my cousin posted on WeChat Moments again. The photo was a picture of her and her fat pig husband hugging, with the caption, "After experiencing embarrassing things, there is always someone who will always be by your side. Maybe this is true love." Just after I read the WeChat Moments, my cousin sent me a private message. Gina, have you seen my WeChat Moments? My husband really loves me so much. Yesterday when I had an accidental exposure, he didn't despise me. He said he would never leave me, and even asked me to give birth to a bunch of children for him. Looking at the eye-stinging words on the screen, I wished I were illiterate. I closed the chat box, and my boyfriend's message popped up. Gina, let's go buy the 3 gold items traditional wedding jewelry tomorrow. Seeing my boyfriend Ethan's message, my heart instantly calmed down. In my previous life, after I died, my cousin's family ran away overnight, and Ethan's hair turned white overnight. He spent a lot of money and used a lot of connections to find their family and successfully sent them to prison. Finally, Ethan came to my tomb and burned the judgment to me. 5 If I hadn't encountered my cousin's family, I believe I would have had a very happy life. The next day, Ethan and I met and went to the mall to buy the 3 gold items for our wedding. Ethan looked at me with a smile. Why are you so clingy today? Hugging my lover who was regained after being lost. I rubbed his arm affectionately. I missed you. Ethan raised his hand to touch my head, but saw that my face suddenly became strange. Before he could react, I pulled him aside. I seemed to see an acquaintance. Ethan was helpless. Why do we need to hide when seeing an acquaintance? Am I your mistress? I covered his mouth and narrowed my eyes as I looked at 2 men not far away. I had just seen one of them 2 days ago. Wasn't he my cousin's husband? I didn't know the other man, but he would secretly hold the other's hand when no one was looking. Needless to say, it was obvious that their relationship must be extraordinary. So this cousin-in-law was bisexual. The 2 walked to a corner not far away and started kissing passionately. I felt disgusted. My cousin-in-law cheated in marriage and had an affair. This kind of person should die 10,000 times. But I was not in a hurry to tell my cousin. Such wonderful good news should of course be discovered by her at a critical moment to be interesting. After Ethan and I bought the 3 gold items, I just saw a message sent by my grandfather in the family group. The wedding of Moon 2 days ago didn't go well. Let's get together again in a couple of days. I'll be the host. Everyone should be present. Maybe because my cousin was my uncle's child. My grandfather had one less layer of prejudice of favoring boys over girls towards her. My cousin had been pampered since she was a child, which led to her being so selfish and conceited now. When I was a child, I would only get cold looks when I saw my grandfather. However, such a good opportunity. I would definitely not miss it. On the day of the family gathering, I arrived at the hotel early and sat down in a corner, when my cousin and her husband also arrived. I sent text messages to 3 people present at the same time with a virtual number. Honey, room number XXX. Waiting for you. 6 Yes. Not only did they arrive, but the male mistress also arrived. From time to time, he passed by these tables and made eyes at my cousin's husband. After receiving the text message, he stuck out his tongue at my cousin's husband and twisted his waist as he went upstairs. My cousin's husband also looked at his phone, made up an excuse casually and went upstairs. Since entering the door, my cousin had been showing off her wonderful husband to everyone. As soon as her husband left, she had to look at her phone bored lie. Then she saw that text message. My cousin's face darkened visibly and she stood up and ran upstairs. Moon. Run more slowly. Grandpa stood up worriedly and asked my uncle and other relatives to follow up and have a look. When our group reached the 5th floor, we only saw my cousin's husband-in-law blocking the door of the room, while my cousin was sitting on the ground crying and shouting loudly. Let that vixen come out. Dare to steal someone else's husband. But don't dare to let me see. I'm wholeheartedly devoted to you. How can you have the nerve to betray me? As soon as she finished speaking, the door opened. The male mistress, wearing a bathrobe, walked out, rolled his eyes, and said in a high-pitched voice, "What are you making a fuss about? I just slept with your husband." When my cousin saw the mistress come out, she was completely dumbfounded. The relatives who witnessed the whole process also showed strange expressions one after another. We all thought that my cousin was going to explode. Unexpectedly, she quickly climbed up and even showed a smile, so it was a misunderstanding. "Honey, is this your good buddy?" My brother-in-law was stunned for a moment, and then nodded repeatedly. Yes. Yes. This is my brother. He drank too much, and I just sent him up here." I was silent. The male mistress was also speechless. He almost shouted in front of everyone that he was a mistress. He behaved so obviously that even the onlookers could see it. But this woman still couldn't? 7. I knew that my husband loves me the most and would never cheat on me. My cousin leaned happily on my brother-in-law's shoulder. The surrounding relatives gave a dry laugh and echoed, "Yes. You two are so happy." Grandpa lost all his face and made an excuse to leave in a hurry. I didn't see the scene I wanted to see, so I couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. However, who can be sure whether my cousin really didn't understand, or just pretended not to understand? In the following days, my cousin still posted bed photos in her WeChat moments every day. She still had a little sense of shame, and would block the elders. Only we peers were the victims. At the beginning, there were still some who liked to watch the fun and gave likes. Later, everyone got tired of it and blocked her one after another. My cousin, who had no one to talk to, stopped posting in WeChat moments and instead sent me photos privately. Last night, my husband wanted me 3 more times. I'm so shy. My husband gave me a small pink apron. He loves me so much. I once suspected that she had changed my note to file transfer assistant. The price of enduring humiliation to take revenge is too high. Finally, once when she sent more than 10 bed photos in a row, I realized that this person really had no shame. So I couldn't bear it anymore. I forwarded these days' photos and text content to the family group. "Cousin, don't send them to me anymore. I really don't want to know how many times you have sex in one night." These photos caused an uproar in the family group. My uncle and aunt each sent several second voice messages asking me to withdraw them. I just refused. My cousin was furious and cursed me in the group by voice. "Gina, just be jealous. I sent you photos to let you share my good luck. Maybe you can find a man." Unexpectedly. You are so ungrateful. It serves you right that no man will love you in this life. Without saying a word, I blocked her and then asked my parents to move. I was worried that this crazy person would come to my door like last time. My parents had no objection and started looking for a house. But my parents didn't forget to remind me, "Gina, you are about to get married. Don't waste your thoughts on them." According to the plan between me and Ethan, we are going to have a wedding next month. But if I don't deal with my cousin and them, I will always feel uneasy. Sure enough, a few days later, my ominous premonition came true. After work this day, Ethan took me to his parents' house for dinner. Unexpectedly, as soon as we entered the door, my cousin was sitting on the sofa. My in-laws were sitting opposite her, handing tissues to the crying cousin. My cousin didn't hear the door opening behind her and was immersed in sadness. "Uncle and aunt, you don't know how miserable I am. I serve my husband every day, but he is looking for a mistress outside. If I were as lucky as Gina and could find a good husband like Ethan." "Cousin, why are you here?" My voice suddenly rang out. and my cousin trembled with fright and quickly turned around. When she saw Ethan beside me, she instantly put on a pitiful expression. Gina, I heard that you are getting married. So I want to ask if you need a bridesmaid? I twitched the corners of my mouth. No. And where did you get the address? I don't think I told you. Right? My cousin's face looked a little flustered, and she hurriedly rushed into the bathroom. I'll go wash my face first. A few minutes later, she walked out with a full set of elaborate makeup. She sat opposite Ethan and smiled shyly. How many years have you been in love? Ethan had already heard about my cousin's absurd things from me, so he naturally didn't have a good impression of her. However, in front of his parents, he couldn't directly drive her away, and could only perfunctorily say, 5 years. My cousin immediately showed a surprised expression. 5 years? Why haven't you had a baby yet? Ethan frowned and looked at her like she was a lunatic. We're not married. Why should we have a baby? My cousin covered her mouth shyly, and said, I think whether married or not, if you love someone, you should have a baby for him. And the fortune teller said that I'm very fertile and destined to have a son. As she spoke, my cousin looked meaningfully at my in-laws. My in-laws looked at each other, feeling very bewildered. I couldn't sit still anymore. I grabbed my cousin's arm and walked outside. Because of the lesson of being pushed down the stairs in my previous life. After being reborn, I had been working hard to exercise. Now I easily dragged her outside the door. Before she could speak, I glared at her coldly. I don't care what you're thinking. If you dare to show up here again, I will definitely post your bed photos downstairs at your husband's company. My cousin, who was about to start arguing, suddenly fell silent. After all, only her husband is the breadwinner in her family right now. If those bed photos really have any negative impact on her husband's job, then there will be no one to bring money home. She curled her lips and said, Fine, don't come if you don't want to. I was kind-hearted enough to be your bridesmaid. But you were so fierce to me. You really don't appreciate my kindness. 9 Back in the room, Ethan had already explained the situation to his parents-in-law. His parents-in-law were very understanding. Instead of blaming me because of my cousin, they sympathized with me for having such a relative. Uncle, aunt, if she dares to come again in the future, just call the police directly. The parents-in-law nodded with a smile. Half a month later, Afan and I went to the hospital for a premarital checkup. Just after the checkup, Ethan suddenly tugged at my sleeve. Honey, look, isn't that your cousin? I looked in the direction he pointed. And sure enough, I saw my cousin walking out of the infectious disease department in a flustered state. And she also saw us. She subconsciously wanted to run away. But then she thought of something and walked towards us instead. Why are you at the hospital? I looked her up and down. My cousin crumpled the test sheet into a ball and stuffed it into her pocket, avoiding this topic. Are you going home? Give me a ride. Ethan refused mercilessly. Sorry. We didn't drive today. My cousin couldn't hide her disappointment, but soon cheered up again. Ignoring my presence, she asked Ethan for his contact information. Seeing that it was almost our turn for the checkup, Ethan gave her his seldom-used spare number. She made sure the phone could be connected, and then let us go. I then took Ethan's spare SIM card. I really wanted to see what other tricks she had up her sleeve. The next day, Ethan said that my cousin had come to his company with a bunch of things. She also said it was a wedding gift for me. I naturally knew this was abnormal, so I told Ethan not to open it yet and bring it back home. When we got home, I remembered that my cousin had walked out of the infectious disease department that day. So I put on 5 layers of gloves before opening her gift. There was a teddy bear, a silk quilt, and a 4-piece bed set. My first reaction was that there might be a camera on the teddy bear, but after checking, I found there was none. The 4-piece bed set was also new. Looking at the brand new silk quilt, I had an idea. I held the quilt up against the light and examined it bit by bit. Sure enough, I found a thin needle in one corner. After taking out the needle, there was actually some red substance on it. Could it be blood? Ethan and I looked at each other. And his face was ugly. Do you think she went to the hospital last time to get an HIV test? 10 now. There's no need to guess what my cousin was planning. She used a needle with blood on it to harm others, thinking that this would make us infected with the virus. But she didn't know that once the blood dried up, the virus in it would become ineffective. She was so bad, stupid and ignorant. Ethan and I planned to call the police. But before calling the police, we asked a lawyer friend and learned that this kind of behavior was very difficult to be judged as intentional injury. Even if it was judged as such, it was an attempted injury. And it was very easy for her to get away with it, or receive a very light sentence. If we let her get away so easily, it would be too cheap for her. Ethan and I discussed it and decided to wait for her like a hunter waiting for his prey. If this trick didn't work, she would surely have other actions. Sure enough, 3 days later, my cousin sent a message to Ethan's spare number. She beat around the bush and asked Ethan if he had any uncomfortable feelings, such as symptoms like fever or rashes. Obviously, she wanted to know if we had been successfully infected. After getting a negative answer, my cousin was very disappointed. But she soon cheered up and began to send Ethan some pictures and suggestive messages. My husband has been on business trips a lot lately. It's so annoying. If only he were as family-oriented as you. Gina still hasn't got pregnant? It must be her problem. Why not try someone else? I ignored her. But she sent more and more messages and even began to slander me. Ethan, you are a good person, so I can't bear to keep it from you. Do you know that Gina had an abortion in high school? I looked at the message with a puzzled face. I had an abortion? Why didn't I know? She is very indiscreet. She often wears very short skirts on the street to seduce men. To be honest, Ethan, I don't think Gina is worthy finally. My cousin directly sent a hotel room number. You deserve a better person. Don't worry. I don't need you to be responsible. And no one else will know about this. It's just that my husband cheated on me. And I want him to taste the feeling of being betrayed too. In my previous life. She also said the same thing. But to me, she blamed me for standing in front of her at her wedding and stealing her limelight, which led to her husband's cheating. So she seduced Ethan, wanting me to be betrayed. Unfortunately, she didn't succeed in my previous life. And she won't succeed in this life either. I sent the hotel room number to the relatives who had frequent contacts with my uncle's family. In addition, there was also a sentence attached. I'm Moon. My husband is cheating on me and is blocked by me in this room. Come and help me catch him. 11. This message was also sent to my cousin's husband's mobile phone. I arrived at the hotel in advance and saw a group of people gathering at the hotel entrance. And then they rushed upstairs together. When they came to the designated room door, everyone couldn't startle the snake. So Grandpa took the lead and walked over to knock on the door. Why are you so late? I've been waiting for a long time. My cousin's Kokalfa's voice came from inside. Immediately after that, the door was opened. My cousin, wearing only her underwear, posed seductively and turned her head to look outside. The moment her eyes met Grandpa's, my cousin was dumbfounded. The relatives were also dumbfounded. In just a few seconds, my cousin's face turned from black to white and then to blue. The relatives around, seeing this scene, wished they could poke their own eyes out. Why are you here? My cousin flusteredly lifted the sheet to cover her body. At this time, my cousin's husband rushed out of the crowd and furiously grabbed my cousin's neck. Who are you waiting for here? Who are you having a secret rendezvous with? I've been on a business trip for just 1 day. And you're already desperate for a man. Right? My cousin screamed and scuffled with him. You still have the nerve to accuse me. You're more desperate for a man than I am. Don't think I don't know that you're selling your body outside. 1 man isn't enough for you. You want several at once. You should be glad that I haven't spread the news that you have HIV. As soon as these words were spoken, the relatives gasped in shock. Now everyone knew that the couple was ill. Those who were originally watching the excitement all backed away, fearing of getting infected. Grandpa, who was closest to them, felt dizzy at these words and fainted with a gulp. Everyone hurriedly carried him downstairs and sent him to the hospital. That night, news came that Grandpa had a heart attack and passed away. My cousin and her husband fought so fiercely that the hotel finally called the police to solve the problem. The two were taken to the police station for a lecture. The next day, my cousin's husband wanted a divorce. He also cursed my cousin in the family group, wanting her to divorce. I thought they would definitely get divorced this time. But unexpectedly, my cousin didn't want to. She refused to divorce no matter what and even sent a video, threatening her husband with jumping off a building. My uncle and aunt were busy with Grandpa's funeral and had no time to take care of her. Unexpectedly, she really jumped from the third floor and broke a leg. Taking advantage of the chaos in my cousin's family, Afam and I got married and held a banquet at the end of the month. We deliberately didn't inform the relatives on my uncle's side. Unexpectedly, on the day of the banquet, she still came, leaning on crutches. It's a pity that she was going to be disappointed. 12. This banquet was not a wedding banquet, but a thank you banquet for Ethan and me. Afon and I were on our honeymoon outside. There were only guests having dinner, and neither Ethan nor I was present. I guessed that my cousin would come to make trouble. So, in order to avoid the miserable situation in my previous life, I booked a tour group for my mother and let her go traveling. Only my father, Ethan's parents, and Ethan's uncle, who is a policeman, were at the thank you banquet. My father called me and couldn't help laughing. She wanted to ruin the occasion. But as soon as she entered the door and saw Ethan's uncle, in police uniform, she was so frightened and that she turned around and ran away. She even dropped her crutches. As he spoke, he also sent me a photo of my cousins fleeing back. I set this photo as the chat background in the family group, feeling extremely happy. The uncle also chased after her and gave her a verbal warning. If she dared to make trouble for us again, he would definitely invite her to the police station for a talk. Since my cousin was taken to the police station after the fight with her husband last time, she had been very afraid of going in again. Hearing these words, she was so frightened and that she repeatedly agreed. Since then, she really never showed up again. Half a year later, my cousin still got divorced. The reason was that her husband, who was also a pathogen carrier, brought back a child, saying that it was born to his mistress outside. My cousin made a big fuss. The fertility she was once most proud of was now useless. She was completely disheartened and signed the divorce agreement. After the divorce, there was no news about my cousin. But according to the relatives of the same generation, they had seen my cousin coming out of the bar with different men several times. They wanted to help, but my cousin told them not to be nosy. It seemed that my cousin began to spread the virus. Sure enough, not long after, my uncle asked for help in the family group. Who knows a lawyer? Moon is in trouble here. It turned out that those who were infected united and sued my cousin for intentional injury. My cousin hid at home, and they also found my uncle's home and asked them to compensate. Of course, my uncle didn't want to and said righteously, "It's all your fault for not being self-loving. If you hadn't fooled around outside, could my daughter have infected you?" These words enraged them, and they said that they would seek justice no matter how much it cost. My uncle got anxious and scuffled with them. As a result, the blood of the infected person splashed into my uncle's eyes. 13. My uncle was also infected with HIV. Now no relative was willing to help this virus-carrying family anymore. When my cousin saw that she was going to be held responsible, she actually abandoned my uncle and aunt and ran away. Before running away, she also went to her ex-husband's house and stabbed him right through. Her ex-husband was not hit in a vital part, but HIV-infected people are already very fragile. He was sent to the hospital for several hours of rescue but couldn't be saved and passed away. My cousin became a murderer and immediately fled in fear of punishment, disappearing without a trace. As soon as she left, the debt collectors came to the door. Only then did my uncle and aunt know that during this period, my cousin had been borrowing money to package herself. She spent a lot of money dressing herself up beautifully and richly in order to infect more people. Now that she had run away, these debts all fell on my uncle and aunt. My uncle's family was burdened with loans, compensated for the ex-husband, and had to treat their own diseases. Soon, they spent all of Grandpa's inheritance and borrowed from all the relatives. Relatives avoided my uncle's family like the plague. My uncle also went to find my parents. But unfortunately, my parents had already sold their house and moved far away. A few years later, my uncle died of a serious illness, and my aunt remarried. We also never heard any news about my cousin again. I found and I got married smoothly and had a lovely daughter 2 years later. From getting married to having a child, Atham and I had never quarreled. One night, I finally had the courage to tell Ethan about my rebirth. At first, he didn't believe it. Later, when I talked about how he had used a lot of connections to seek justice for me after my death, his face became solemn. Because those people I mentioned really existed. And at present, these people had not had any contact with me yet. We talked for a long time. The next morning, Ethan asked me to send him a copy of the photo of my cousins fleeing back. He said he was worried that his cousin would come to find him. I guessed that he was frightened, and gently comforted him. Your cousin has been on the run for several years and is ill. Maybe she's already dead. Ethan shook his head uneasily. It's always okay to be cautious. Who would have known that when our daughter was 5 years old, something almost really went wrong? 14 that day I worked overtime, and Ethan was responsible for picking up our daughter from the kindergarten. As a result, the teacher said that the daughter had already been picked up. Ethan became nervous instantly, and called the police and then checked the surveillance footage. He recognized from the figure in the surveillance that it was exactly his cousin who had been on the run for many years. Hearing this news, I rushed over like crazy and started looking for the child nearby. Fortunately, I found my daughter under a bridge. She was huddled in the corner, and only ran out when she recognized me. I hugged my daughter tightly, and tears streamed down my face like rain. The daughter wiped the tears off my face. Mom, don't cry. Dad taught me that if I encounter a kidnapper, I must find a way to escape. So I pretended to have a stomachache and ran away into the bushes. Suddenly, there was a sound of footsteps behind me. Ethan in the distance shouted to me, "Be careful behind you." I suddenly turned my head and saw my cousin, looking crazy, rushing towards me with a syringe. Without hesitation, I turned around and ran. Over the years, I had been insisting on exercising, and my cousin, who had been ill for a long time, couldn't catch up with me even though she tried her best. The police arrived soon and pinned her to the ground. She raised her head forcefully, staring at me full of hatred. "It's all your fault. You stole my good fortune in my previous life, and you've been standing by all this time in this life. If you had warned me at the beginning, I wouldn't have ended up like this." It seemed that she was also reborn. I stared at her coldly. "A person like you only deserves this kind of end." The cousin was arrested. The family of my former brother-in-law heard the news and rushed over immediately to appeal. With all kinds of charges added together, the cousin was sentenced to death. Finally, and I no longer had to worry that one day the cousin would suddenly jump out and harm us. This nightmare that had lasted for many years finally ended. Soon after, I got a promotion successfully and left this place with my family, truly starting a brand new life. The end.